All right, we are here, podcast, I think number 4 or 5, but we are talking about the uncommon human. What makes the uncommon human? Remember, it's performing the common uncommonly well.
Welcome to the Uncommon Human Podcast, where we help you perform the common uncommonly well. Your coach for all things physical and spiritual is Derek De Rosario, who for 25 years has brought transformation to thousands of clients. With God's help, Coach Derek has overcome many adversities on his own journey of faith and fitness, and now he's the owner of Fit to Serve Fitness in Henderson, Nevada. Having discovered tennis at a young age, he excelled at the amateur, intercollegiate, and professional levels. Afterwards, he discovered the sport of CrossFit, and by 2019 had ranked #1 CrossFitter for the state of Nevada in his division. Having achieved all this, Coach Derek now considers himself an ambassador for Christ to help you in your journey to become the uncommon human through faith and fitness.
And we're just moving up the pyramid here with the Fit to Serve method, and we have reached the mobility piece. We have Dr. Petrick, longtime friend. How are you doing, Doc?
Doing fantastic.
Yes, we are making our way, believe it or not, in our car down to Mexico, Rosarito, Mexico.
Yeah.
Doc gets to practice the things that he does every single day, gets to care for people, love on people, and the talents and the gifts that God has given him. He gets to just give a little bit back to the people down in Mexico and Tijuana and Rosarito. So when I asked him, he was all into it. He said yes right away. Let's go book it. And he carved out a little bit of his busy time with me to come down to Mexico. But we're going to talk about mobility. Mobility is a huge piece. I know with the Fit to Serve method, we talked about nutrition is a bottom piece. We have to control what we put in our mouth, what we eat, controls a lot. But I think mobility is right up there, with nutrition. It's a huge piece, and people neglect it so much because I think there's no instant gratification. Everyone wants to see how you bench press. They want to see how much you squat, but no one really cares, can you touch your toes? But it matters so much. Those things that you've always preached to me over like 20 years we've known each other. Your strength and flexibility, they kind of go hand in hand, right? How flexible you are is how strong you are. Because if you can't get in these positions that you've shared with me over the years, and it just all makes sense. The older I get, the more I'm in your office. Even preventative stuff, right? It's not. You always tell me you don't have to come in here just when you're injured. You have to have this preventable routine in your whatever everyday life. If you're an athlete, Division I, if you're an everyday person, just kind of waking up and going to work. If you're not mobile, you're not able to enjoy a lot of those things in everyday life.
Well,
right,
your
Doc?
way to think about it is that sitting is the new smoking.
Okay.
All right. And what I mean by that is that there really, in time, has proven that there's probably not a worse thing you could probably do to your body than to smoke, right? In almost every condition and every stage of inflammation, smoking only enhances that terrible decay. And so smoking, again, we all know is bad. And it's the same thing now. We start to realize and recognize that the more sedentary our lives become, the harder on our bodies it becomes. That old saying that if you don't use it, you lose it,
Yes.
really comes to play. And mobility is not just moving around, but more importantly, it's about proper mobility. And one of the things we talk about and what we're going down to do now is teaching people the proper way to move. So therefore, that one, you can prevent injuries, as well as you can also, not only can you prevent injuries, you can also make sure that injuries recover real fast. So,
Yes.
So and the thing about it is that mobility is not just how much you can move; it's how effectively you can move, and then how does that affect the muscle, tendon, ligament, and surrounding soft tissue. And when you got to take care of your joints, so it's really important that you maintain that, because that's kind of where the balance is.
Yes.
When you're standing up, and if you notice in elderly people, they fall a lot. Right? They fall a lot because their body, in the joints where those proprioceptive nerve fibers are, they start to die, wither, they start to wear, like an arthritic joint, when it's bone on bone. All those proprioceptive fibers are worn away, so they don't know where they're at, so they lose balance and they fall, and that's when they break stuff. So it's really, really important to make sure that you maintain mobility, not just because you can move better, but because neurologically you are healthier too. So mobility's very important.
No, and what got you so excited in the early days of mobility and kind of the profession of where you're at right now?
probably say that one, it's a good question. Once I entered this profession because I was injured.
Okay.
I was in a car accident. Really, it was a 22 years old kid. I could barely hold a chicken wing or a glass of water. I had foot drop, and I was struggling because I was young and in shape, high school athlete, college athlete, and now I can barely hold a glass of water to brush my teeth. So it really was kind of, to be tragic, but I found a doctor by the name of Dr. James Atkins in Arizona. He treated me, and again, getting back to mobility, after my accident, I lost range of motion, and as the tissue was fibrosing, and this myofibroblasts and all those cells were starting to stick in around the nerve, I was getting numbness and tingling and all these nasty symptoms to the point where I had shakes. So he created mobility and allowed the nerve to pass through the muscle and not be bound to it or stuck to it. So mobility is just more than just how I'm moving. It actually had to do down to the actual cells need to move with each other so that they don't stick. It's kind of like a good way to picture a rubber band and then picture a fan belt or a vacuum cleaner belt, both rubber, but big difference in the elasticity.
Yes.
Well, when you need fan belts, that's good. Those are like your ligaments. But when you need rubber bands, which is more like muscle and tendon, you need those for specific movement patterns. Right?
Yes.
So for me, it was one, being a patient and then realizing what it took to get me better. And the active release protocol, which is really shortening the tissue. It's a treatment protocol done by hand where you shorten the tissue, take a contact, which is depth and translative force, and then drawing the tissue underneath your contact that breaks up those the scarring and the fibers.
Yes.
To create better mobility. So for me, I had to be a patient first. Unfortunately, I had to deal with almost a life ending, but definitely a life altering situation. Hey, thank you God for unanswered prayers, and thank you God for those big mountains to climb, because if it wasn't, and honestly, Derek, if it wasn't for that tragic accident, I would have never found the happiest place in the world. That's what I do now for a living. I've never been happier. And so it's like, yes, something bad, but boy, did it give me my life. I'm so grateful. So
wow. No, that's true, because a lot of times the things that we overcome, or God allows us to overcome, they can become our biggest calling in life. And I know in my calling as well, overcoming a lot of things as a child became my biggest calling. And yeah, like you said, what a blessing, right? What a blessing. After, you don't see it in that way at that time, but you're like, God's doing something with this. God's giving me a heart. He's giving me a heart for this for a reason. And it's because I think you walk through it. You got to see all sides of it. And I remember coming into your office probably about 18 years ago, sprained an ankle in tennis. I come in and I had gray. No gray we had. I had this big old ankle. And I was in this ice bucket every day in your office, and you just be pressing, and you're like, we got to break all that blood tissue up. And I'm like, oh man, you come back tomorrow, and I'm screaming. You're like, Derek, it's okay. It's going to hurt just a little bit, but it was that consistency that you continue. And that's the beginning when I started learning about this active release. It's active release, right?
Yeah.
And is there a lot of people that do this?
All right, Doc. Well, we're here in Mexico. We had that long drive down here. It wasn't that long. We got down here pretty quick, huh? Kind of a quick sailing.
It was smooth. Pretty easy. Pretty easy.
Wanted to touch back on the active release, the mobility piece, which is so true to our heart at Fit to Serve. And I know it's super important to you. It's all that you preach about.
It's my world.
It's your whole world. And so tell us a bit about the active release and what that looks like and the importance of it.
Well, before we kind of jump into it, it's really important to know that there are typically 3 types of injuries. There's the chronic, repetitive, over time.
Yep.
That would be like your carpal tunnel. You type in some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have your acute, which is an accident, a spill, a fall, sports injury. And then you have your crush or pressure, something pressing on something.
Yes.
Now, all 3 of these mechanisms actually create damage to the tissue being muscle, tendon, ligament, or surrounding soft tissue.
Okay.
So there's an actually equation that fits into this. The resting time between movement, the force of the movement, the number of repetitions of the movement, and the amplitude.
Okay.
So give you a comparison. So if you were to look at it, someone chopping wood, a lot of resting time between swings.
Yes.
But the force is great, amplitude is low, and frequency is relatively low. So comparatively to typing,
Mhm.
typing, the movement's really fast, not a lot of force goes into hitting those keystrokes, right?
Yeah.
The amplitude's high, but the resting time is low.
Right.
So that all relates to what's known as an equation for what's the insult to the tissue.
Okay.
Okay, so you could actually look at any individual activity and kind of get an idea of what parameter that's going to function in injury. So
Right.
what happens is that tissue sticks together like a paintbrush with the paint lifting the bristles. It's like all those myofibroblasts start to stick in it here, and you lose the elasticity in the tissue.
Yes.
So it goes from like a rubber band to like a fan belt on your car. Both rubber, but the elasticity is greatly different, right?
Yes.
So you can see it. So what ends up happening is your body starts to create stability where it needs mobility.
Okay.
And where it needs stability, it's creating mobility. And as you see a lot with the knee.
Yes.
Almost any knee joint it can be wear and tear, but most of the time, if there is a chronic issue with the knee, it's probably coming from the hip.
Yes. Yes.
Because the knee is a stability area, but the hip is a mobility area. And when people injure the hip, your body's going to get that extra mobility that it lost.
Yes.
To the joint above or beneath it. So it's either the knee or the low back.
Okay.
So when someone has low back pain or knee pain, and there's no real traumatic event, you most likely want to say, hey, I better look above or beneath and find out really where the damage is coming from. So what active release does is it locates those scars that are sticking together due to those equations that I just mentioned, and you find it through palpation. Now, the tissue actually changes within 24 hours, 48 hours. You can start to feel the tissue be swelling, the swelling feeling that you get.
Yeah. Like my ankle when I had that.
When you had the ankle 18 years ago.
Yeah.
What ultimately happens when you palpate it, it feels like you can feel it. It's swollen, you know that. And then over time, it goes from like a nice swollen feeling, not a nice swollen feeling, but a swollen feeling, to a thicker, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And what that is that's that tissue drying out, and it's getting thicker and thicker and then losing its elasticity.
Yes.
So what active release does is you find it, you take a contact, which is not compression, it's compression with translation. And then you pass it, you draw the tissue underneath it, shorten, and then you take your contact and then you lengthen it, and it breaks all those fibers free, restoring lymph drainage, restoring vascularity. Basically helps to the tissue.
Yeah.
It is impossible for tissue to respond normally when there's a scar or a tear. Okay, so people have to realize that. So if you're dealing with a lack of mobility, your body is continuously scarring. It's continuously getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And the part that we don't really talk about, Derek, is the fascia. And if you don't know what fascia is, everybody peeled an orange. And if you ever peeled the orange, the fascia in the body is the white part.
The white part, yep.
But believe it or not, it has its own neurology. It's probably one of the most, if you've ever seen it online, if you ever Google it and you look up fascia and see a video of it, it's some of the most remarkable structure. It's almost like a never-ending spider web. And it's one piece.
Wow.
From the tip of the toe to the eyebrow, the whole body is one piece of fascia. Interesting, right?
Amazing.
So when you talk about mobility, realize there's a neurology to it, that if you don't mobilize the joint, you wear on those nerve endings in the joints, where most of your what's known as proprioception. And proprioception is balance, where you are in space.
Yes.
And if you wear on those joints and you kill those nerve endings, as we age, when we stand up, our bodies have lost the ability to know where the heck we are. And that's typically when we have these unseen falls. A lot of times we talked about, I think it was yesterday, we were talking about somebody who fell, could have hit their head on the gentleman from the church.
Yes.
So you look at that, different scenarios. But the point that I'm making is that people have a tendency to sometimes fall. And they don't know why. Like, I'm losing my balance. No, you're not working on your balance or movement. And the only way to do that is to keep those joints healthy and to continuously perpetuate good movement and mobility.
Yeah. And so that's a great point. Mobility with our youth today. It's not really talked about. It's I know me growing up, I had an exercise, workout, stretching program. It just built into my tennis program. I mean, my coach told me to do these things. But you see kids today, they just go out there and jump on the basketball court and do whatever. And they're they feel that they're pretty flexible. How important is it for the youth to start a regimen?
Well, interestingly enough, most of the movement patterns that we teach in our office are what's considered primitive movement patterns. We're just accentuating them and making them better, right?
Okay. Yep.
So deep squats, things like that are
Yep.
absolutely critically important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned our youth, and I always get into these debates in regards about the educational system being broken.
Yeah.
And I'm challenged by that because it really depends upon who you ask.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to dummy down a society, if you wanted to make a overweight, obese, uneducated, dummy down society,
Right.
then our educational system is working perfectly, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's the truth.
Yes. Yes.
The saddest part is that they've taken the physical nature out of our schools.
Mm-hmm.
So more so than just mobility. I mean, we used to do all kinds of things in gym class and you would see it. So they've
Absolutely.
taken that away.
That's right.
And what they've done is they've replaced it with participation medals.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. They're missing a mechanism because there's nothing more fragile than a child's mind.
That's right.
And the attention span of that mind is so limited. So by removing the one physical outlet that a lot of these children would have, and having them press all that energy down throughout the day, and then saying and labeling a kid as ADHD,
Yes.
is an issue.
Right.
So I want to circle back and tell you why this is so important, is that the one thing that we're missing from our society is early childhood development and movement
Yes.
and exercise.
That's right.
And if you could sprinkle, you know, Jesus Christ in there, you got a recipe for a healthier society just with those 2 to 3 little things. So
Amen. Amen.
I'm saddened when I go to the schools. And
Yes.
yesterday we were at the orphanage.
Yes.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
When we were there, I was saddened to see the movement patterns of the kids.
Yeah.
To me, it was breaking my heart. Their knees were caved in, their bodies. And I'm talking like these kids should have been
There you go.
exemplary. They should have been like,
Yes.
this is how you move,
Yes.
stand up, you know,
Yes.
Joaquin.
Well, they were saying the one kid, he's a workout guy. He's going to come down here, and he was on his toes with his heels up and
Heels up,
knees caving in, right?
functionally, yep. And that's
couldn't do the basics. Where we're
couldn't do the basics. And I'm saddened by that.
Yes.
You know, that really
Yes.
was breaking my heart.
Yes.
And you know, it was interesting to see them kind of mold into what we were asking for.
Yes.
But, you know, none of them had and I wish I spoke Spanish
Yes.
better than I do.
Right.
But I wanted to tell them, you know, I wanted to bring in our FMS board and lay it down. Like, okay, put your heels up now. Now let's try it this way.
That's
and see
right.
what happens now when you functionally. Because I see this youth now, especially here,
Yes.
heading towards early degenerative changes in their body and frame,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
All of which we, if proper education of them, could
Mhm.
teach them so that way, you want to talk about healthcare, look at that right now. I mean,
Yeah.
if you teach people not to be sick, if you teach people to move properly, then you reduce the risk of injury, reduce the risk of fall, you reduce the reduce of pathology, less
Mhm.
diseases when we're moving.
That's right.
Proven time again.
Absolutely.
So I obviously, we're not going to call me the mobility king because that is not my title, but I will tell you, I can't think of anything more important
Yes.
in the human frame
Absolutely.
than proper mobility.
Yes.
And I'm not going against those people that want to strengthen. I mean, you need that too. But if you can't move, you can't strengthen. And
That's
if
right.
you can't take a tissue forceful,
That's right.
your biomechanical direction
Uh-huh.
and back and forth, you're never going to get that movement.
That's right.
So,
That's right. Absolutely. I remember before going in, you mentioned if we can just fix their squat, that's a win today.
yeah, that's what I said.
If we can
That's
just
it.
fix their squat, and we could have spent a whole weekend seminar on their squat, you know, and we
absolutely.
just scratched the surface of just like building relationship, hanging out, having fun, and then you know.
Did you
getting
see the
into-
change in the mood in the room?
Yeah.
When you walk in, they're like, all right, well, me, I mean,
Yeah.
I stick out like
Uh-huh.
Waldo. I mean, who's the white guy, right? So it's the truth. I walked in there and was like, I was the only, you know, really person there. So they're like, they don't know who I am. And we walked in and the mood was kind of somber a little bit, right? They
Yeah.
didn't really want to participate, not
Yeah.
with us, with anybody. They had their little cliquey kind of little groups.
Uh-huh.
The mood felt down. I felt like I was in an orphanage.
Uh-huh.
And then once we started the Fit to Serve, and it was really nice because you got to see the mood change in the room.
Yes.
You got to see them participate a little different.
It's amazing what a squat and a
Yeah.
burpee will do with people, right? I
I
mean,
mean, it was
people-
more than that because that was the movement part of it. But it was really the interesting part about it was that they became part of group think. They started working together, the partnership.
Yes.
They started cheering for each other without us saying cheer for your
Yes.
partner.
Yes.
They were cheering for each other, and
Amen.
they were opening up.
Yes.
And it's like I was moved by it, because it was like this very, you look at the simplest things in the world in our lives, and it couldn't be any more simpler than just kind of moving and being a part of something. So I was like, I was grateful to be there. I'm very, very grateful.
No, it was amazing being able to, hang in there, and I know your heart for the youth and the kids. I mean, we share that commonality. That's why in our relationship over the years, and soon if I asked you, hey, let's go to Mexico, you're all in. Real quick, want to touch on, we touched on the youth. Now I want to go into the 55 plus range. We get clients in our gym, and I'm too old to mobilize. I've done that when I was a kid. Like the importance of mobility at that age and going forward.
I think that one of the things that comes, the Greeks did it and described the youthfulness of a life this way. When you're young, you got war. Then you get to a certain age, into those 20s, late 20s and early 30s, even into the 40s, and you got business. You're growing, you're trying to build something substantial for your family. And then after you've had war, you've had business, you get into servitude, and you start serving. And then after you've served, you get into wisdom. And then once you get past wisdom, you get into philosophy. So taking a look at where those people are, those people in the 55s,
yes,
they're into wisdom. They probably served either their family, their kids. They've been in business, and when they were young, they were in war. Now they're into the wisdom side of it. Yeah. I think that one of the most impactful things is allowing them to have music, and maybe providing a different type of movement for them, as you would the kids doing duck walks and angry gorillas and stuff, is good for the youth. But I think that elderly group, not that they shouldn't do that stuff, but I think that if you put an element to music, like if you get around an elderly group and a group of seniors, and you put on music from their time,
absolutely,
the vivid nature of what that does to the brain, and they can get up and they'll start dancing,
sweating with
like they did when they were youth. I mean, I've seen this time and time again through other church groups and things where we go to a location where there's a group of elderly people. And if we take the time as youth to shut our mouths and listen, we're going to learn so much. And I love to always put music on from their kind of age group and see what happens in the room.
Yes.
And just like with those kids,
yes,
when you walk into the room and they're like, who is this person standing there? And all of a sudden you put on music from their generation and their sphere of understanding. All of a sudden they start to move and they start to groove. And next thing you know, it's like you can see the old dance moves that they wish they had, come out. And so for me, anytime that you can, and again, if you don't use it, you lose it, you gotta move. That was one of the things we do. I don't know if I told you this. I started a yoga program for people in wheelchairs, and it's called You Gotta Move.
Yeah.
Because in wheelchairs and people that are disabled, the thing that we take for granted is movement. So it's not just movement of their body because they're paralyzed. That's right. We want them to move their gut, their stomach, their intestines. When you move that around, you aid in digestion, you aid in moving the fluid or everything through the system.
Yes.
So health comes from that movement. So there's a lot of stuff out there that we should be doing, just from simple movements to exercise movements to fun movements to dancing.
Yes.
Just even to doing a little bit of you gotta move,
That's
that kind of thing. So movement is key.
Amen. Amen. Our motto at our gym, it's in our last gym, we're putting it back on our wall. It's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I just want to hit on this. We have 4 core values at our gym. The first one's humility. The second one's mobility, flexibility. The third one is, what is the third one? Endurance. And then we got love. But mobility, when I look at mobility and flexibility even on the spiritual side, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. When I asked you to come down here to Mexico, things start running through our heads. Oh, Mexico, man. Everyone
get kidnapped, the cartel's gonna get me.
Yes, all these things. But in life, God wants us to be flexible. He wants us to be mobile. When we're called to go, we need to go. We need to go and not look at the consequences and not look at, all these things are going to happen to me. if it's from God, right? We can go on our own conscience and whatever, but where God guides, he provides. And so I was just so honored when you were able to come down here and just share a little bit about, the mobility piece of, being flexible in life, like being flexible when you're called to do something uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nothing great ever was created or accomplished without there being some struggle and somebody being uncomfortable at some time.
Yes.
I'll give you, taking it clear back to the founding of our United States, when Christopher Columbus arrived here, there was probably some time with desertion, even mutiny, where he was pretty uncomfortable.
That's right.
But only because of that uncomfortable situation did he find glory.
That's right.
In the United States.
Right.
And so we challenge people that way too, is that if you're comfortable, you're not living.
That's right.
And you got to learn to be comfortable. And the more you can be comfortable when it's uncomfortable. Yeah, I was reading it today.
Sure.
Man, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's it.
You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And if
That's
you're not
right.
uncomfortable, then you're not living your fullest life. And that's
right.
and that goes to the word.
That's right.
That's
right.
I didn't realize the magnitude. We met with Pastor Mike yesterday for lobster tacos right on the beach.
Yeah.
And I never heard it this way after 49 years in and around the church, that the significance was planting other churches, right?
Yes.
So you get the one-to-one, and now in my businesses, we're about one-to-many.
Yes.
If you really want to be successful, ultra successful financially, it's one-to-many. Unless you make a gazillion dollars with one client or one person, which is virtually impossible, but the one-to-many. And it hit me almost like a marketing train when he was sitting there, in a sense, but a spiritual train. And he said, it's not about the one-to-one, it's the one-to-many. And I don't plant people, I plant churches. And it was like, that really resonated with me, because I saw his passion and how he knew God would do amazing things for those people who got uncomfortable. And he lived in that the whole time. He was talking about these pastors. Some make it, some don't, right?
That's right.
And the ones that make it are the ones who get comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's
like
right.
If you go there thinking, well, I'm going to be here 6 months, the Lord's going to bless me with income, the Lord's going to bless me with a place to live, and you keep thinking that the Lord is going to do it, and you become uncomfortable, and you don't like that uncomfortable feeling, and you give up, or you quit, or you do something like that, then it certainly wasn't right to be. But
that's right.
Hearing Pastor Greg talk about planting these churches really resonated. Mike, sorry. Pastor Greg's my guy back home. But hearing Pastor Mike mention that to me the other day was really kind of resonating with me. I was like, that's really what it's about. He's planting churches all over Mexico, 9 and Culiacan.
Yeah.
I mean, just stuff like that. I have never
Next
had a pastor that really emphasized the importance of planting churches.
Wow.
Like, I never even really thought of it. I don't know. I guess just through God, I guess the church showed up one day, right? I never realized the business aspect of it, not like the business, like sales, but you have, like, for me in my business, I had to meet the one client, and then the one client told another client came in and said, hey, Dr. Petrick's pretty good at this skill set active release thing. And then next thing you know, 25,000 clients later, here I am.
That's right.
I did not understand that with the church until this trip. Like, you got to actually start with that one client and then that next client. And how about when we were going through town and you could see the people that actually he knew, oh, that guy goes to my church, that guy goes to my church, that guy's sister's uncle used to go to my church. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. We can get on a whole nother podcast about consistency and about, how his consistency here and your consistency back home and anything that is going to be an impact in people's life. It's over time, right? People want it instantaneous yesterday, that's with nutrition and working out, and that's with mobility. And so it takes time. You put time into it. And if you have a passion for what you do, it doesn't even seem like work.
Right.
It doesn't seem like work. And then you wake up 20 years later, like, wow, I've served all these people. Lord, you blessed us with being able to do this. And man, I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you.
Thank you, man. We got to get out to the church right now, thank you guys. And that's mobility. Another thing we stand by is adversity causes some to break and others to break records. So we got to go out and break records for Jesus.
I have something else too to add.
Yes,
I love
yes.
this part, and I'm going to
Yes.
mention this to Pastor Mike. We see him today because
Yes.
we're going to be watching the UFC fights later on.
Yes,
He said
yes,
that.
yes, yes.
And it's really an interesting thing. I had he asked about Christians in the UFC, and I wanted to tell him I had a really unique experience. I had a Christian guy come to me, and he was just probably one of the strongest guys on the TV show that I work on. And I said to him, man, you're constantly going out. You this can never stop. You had all this energy. And I said, what is the thing that keeps you going? And he said, Jesus never tapped. And I went,
wow,
think about that.
that's
All
right.
the struggles we're in,
That's
all the
right.
struggles you may be
That's
going
right.
through, all the fights,
right.
the battles, the choking,
Yes.
all the stuff that this kid was
Yes.
dealing with.
Yes.
And he just looked straight at my face. And I said,
Yes.
how do you keep doing this? And oh my
Yes.
gosh. And he just
That's
said, because
right.
Jesus never tapped. And it was very
Wow.
impactful to me.
Wow.
I want to give a
Wow.
call out
Wow.
there that remember, Jesus never gave in. He never
He never
tapped.
gave in.
He took it straight up. So
Yeah, no, and it ties right into Resurrection Sunday coming up this Sunday, and he carried that cross all the way to Calvary.
right.
He didn't stop. He didn't let go. He went all the way for you and I, so our sins will be forgiven. God bless, guys.
God bless.
Enjoyed this podcast? Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video as much as possible. And visit our exclusive Facebook community where Derek offers training videos and other valuable content to help you grow through faith and fitness. And don't miss out on a free 12-week nutrition guide. Just go to smiletoday.fitness. That's smiletoday.fitness.